My gift is my song, and this one's for you. Yes, the Joker's back, but it's no laughing matter. Welcome to a mirthless Macclevoid at the movies. Hello lunatics, it's Dr. Macclevoid here, it's not my real name. And here we are talking about Joker, Folie. Who's Ada? We don't find out. She doesn't appear in the movie, and so it's a bit misleading really. But here's a pretentiously titled sequel to a pretentious pastiche of Martin Scorsese movies. We could stop there, but we won't. But I think it's really a movie about director Todd Phillips. Who the hell is Todd Phillips, you ask? You hadn't heard of him, had you, before Joker? And the reason you hadn't heard of him was because he made stuff like The Hangover, which was an absolutely enormous smash hit. You know, one of the biggest comedy smash hits of all time. Then he made The Hangover Part 2. A despised sequel that broke the brand. But, you know, how many times is something like that going to happen in one man's career? So, Joker, Folie is a movie about doomed relationships. Though, if you ask me, all relationships are doomed. They always start the same way, don't they? You know, with that initial burst of happiness and euphoria. You can't believe it. You can't believe you're not alone in the world anymore. You've met the person of your dreams. There they are, ready-made. Like they were made for you, almost. Isn't it wonderful when you have that connection? You can't believe your luck. You must be special. God must have been watching because they gave you that perfect individual. Then she starts to criticise what you wear, doesn't she? And the things that you like, and your little mannerisms and quirks, and the fact that, you know, you like a nice cup of tea, but you don't always finish it. Little things like that. And those minor criticisms, well, they lead to stronger criticisms, don't they, of your worldview and your politics and your temperament. Before you know it, you realise you're not really being asked to be you at all. You're asked to fulfil a role, perform a role, a sort of archetypal role, an archetypal gender role. And you don't conform to that template. You're not a Disney character. You're a real human being, God damn it! Three-dimensional. Nuanced, special, because we're all special, you see, in our own ways, and not in a mentally retarded sense, but sometimes in a good way. And then, before you know it, your dreams turned into a nightmare, and she doesn't want you anymore. She tells you it's over. She doesn't care. She doesn't care if you live or die. It's all just been for nothing. It's all just been a horrible waste of time, an attempt to placate someone who could never be placated. You were never going to win, because you're not a fantasy figure in somebody's mind. Still, let's not dwell on that too much. What's that got to do with Joker, Folie? Well, we'll come to that in the spoiler section of this review. But for a moment, let's talk about Todd Phillips, because I think that this is really a film, a very personal film, about Todd Phillips, the director of Joker. Folie. This is a man who made his name with movies like Road Trip and Due Date. Do you remember those? Now, of course you don't, because in the 2010s, when the likes of me was having to endure this shit, you were out having a good time, weren't you? But I did see these movies, and I can tell you that if I wanted a sort of nuanced social commentary on modern American life, or even American life in the 1980s, or even the kind of, deeply probing, psychologically dense American drama that the likes of Coppola and Scorsese made, I would not turn to the director of fucking Road Trip to make it. But by doing a sort of Scorsese pastiche 5 years ago, incidentally a terrible time for me, I had cellulitis in my leg, nearly killed me, but let's not get into that. By doing that, this man had the biggest hit of his career. Quite astonishingly big hit. And like Arthur Fleck, he was a troubled, talentless, unloved miscreant. But he told a good joke in a familiar style, and all of a sudden he's fucking Bill Hicks as far as the critics are concerned. How many 4 and 5 star reviews? That odious mechanism for rating movies, that odious reductive mechanism for rating movies. How many of those did you see in your papers and your TV guides and your streamer, rating systems? Quite a few. People liked Joker, didn't they? It made $1 billion at the global box office. $1 billion. Because it was sort of like, it was almost a passive-aggressive attack on Martin Scorsese. Because, of course, Martin Scorsese hates comic book movies. He thinks that they are the quintessence of everything that's wrong with modern American filmmaking. And here was one that appropriated his style. Here's a comic book movie, a DC movie, in the Scorsese mould. What a funny idea. What a passive-aggressive idea. But it worked wonderfully. If you're a comic book fan of a certain age, so you thought to yourself, my God, they're finally giving these movies the treatment they deserve. They're treating them like serious texts for a change. And who better than the director of Road Trip to realise that vision? So, if Joker was about taking shortcuts like gratuitous violence and, media recognition to gain notoriety, Joker, Folie, is about the come down. It's about the realisation that although many will want more of the same, and expect you to live up to that previous piece of performance art, there is a ceiling for the talentless. Ultimately, if you are Rupert Pupkin, as many of us are, you can kidnap Jerry Lewis, but you can get yourself on his show. But the audience aren't going to laugh because you're not funny. And one thing we know about Todd Phillips is he's not funny. Have you seen Road Trip? So this is Todd Phillips trying to keep the wolf from the door. He goes bleaker. He smashes together some genres in a sort of act of Kubrickian incongruity. Yes, that's right. I said Kubrickian incongruity. Make a note of it. Impress your friends. But ultimately, mediocrity abides, doesn't it? It abounds. And the fandom turns. Joker, Folie, looks great, sounds great, looks like a serious movie, just like the first movie. Warner Brothers are very good at polishing turds. They give directors, that sandbox in which to work and say, realise your artistic vision, Todd Phillips. I don't believe that Road Trip was the summit of your talents. I'm going to give you a real DP and, an enormous amount of money, and you show us what you can do. And sure enough, there are visual flourishes, many lovely visual flourishes. There are poignant song choices, not least the heartbreaking Jacques Brel song, If You Go Away, which the use of which here is highly effective. A few people in my screening snivelled. But the depth aimed for here, but conspicuously not achieved, is attributable to one factor: that you have a story and a set of characters that required a screenplay by the likes of Paul Schrader in his heyday, or Robert Towne in his 1970s heyday. But who's writing this movie? Not them, but the director of Starsky and Hutch. And yet, perhaps fueled by the director's own imposter syndrome, there is a touch of something more to this sequel than the original. Yeah, you're not going to hear that from many sources, but that is the truth of it. If the original was just a sort of recycling of the King of Comedy, Joker, Folie has got a little bit more in the tank, a little bit more to say in terms of social commentary. And unlike the first movie's sort of fetishizing of fantasy, nihilistic fantasy, the sequel has something to say about the real world. We'll talk about that now in a section that contains spoilers. Not for nothing does Joker, Folie begin with an animated Warner Brothers cartoon. The Joker in Me and My Shadow. Initially you think, oh fuck, Todd Phillips isn't attempting a sort of Gremlins 2 the New Batch kind of postmodern take on the first movie, is he? No, fortunately no. I mean, let's give Phillips a little... I was hard on him in the first section. Let's give him a little bit of credit here. This is a sequel where a lot of things could have gone wrong in terms of over-egging the pudding. And he does show remarkable restraint. You know, the musical elements don't overwhelm this movie and turn it into a camp fest. And the animated short that opens the movie, which is entitled Me and My Shadow, basically sets out the movie's stall without whacking you over the head with it with a mallet. The animated section is about the consequences of fantasy taking on a life of its own. The Joker's shadow literally comes alive, appropriates his identity, and starts to perform as him, and locks the original in a cupboard or whatever. Now that is the whole movie, really, in microcosm. You know, Arthur Fleck spends most of the movie in the cupboard, while his reputation takes on a life of its own in the world outside. The cult of personality, yes? So, this is a problem, because one could argue that we are not our reputations, we are not our shadows. I'm not Dr. Macclevoid. This is a personality, a performance, a projection that I force on you so that, you know, you've got something you can latch on to in your own lives, a point of reference for your social and cultural criticism. But I am not he, as I keep telling you at the beginning of every video. I'm just pretending to be him. And so it is with the Joker and Arthur Fleck. Joker's not a real person. Arthur Fleck's lawyer is trying to get him off the hook for multiple murder. Says the only defence is an insanity defence. You must make that division clear between the troubled boy who was bent out of shape and turned into a psychotic, and the manifestation of that rage, this clown, this killer clown. If you can't make that distinction, the jury will convict you for murder and you will go to the chair. And, you know, Fleck's happy enough to go along with this. Until he meets Harlequin, Lady Gaga, who, on the contrary, says, no, fuck that advice. They want to put you back in your box. You've got to be you. And the real you is the Joker, not this timid little mouse, but a man. A great man, the kind of man who shoots talk show hosts live on TV. And Lady Gaga is, in some respects, the kind of Faye Dunaway of this story. You remember Faye Dunaway in Network? One of the many great 1970s movies that the Joker and the Joker Folie wishes it was, but is not.
Indifferent to suffering. Insensitive to joy. All of life is reduced to the common rubble of banality. War, murder, death. All the same to you as bottles of beer. And the daily business of life is a corrupt comedy. You even shatter the sensations of time and space into split seconds and instant replays. You're madness, Diana. Virulent madness. And everything you touch dies with you.
She saw Howard Beale and sensed an opportunity. She was fascinated by the potential of his on-screen persona, the mad prophet of the airways. Remember? It was up to Howard's real friends to say, wait a minute, this is exploitation. You're just, you know, taking advantage of a mentally ill person. But Lady Gaga senses that, you know, Arthur's ripe for plucking. She likes the Joker. She's very much attracted to the persona. And she eggs him on. Like all women. Yeah, be that funny, zany character. But don't stop being that zany, funny character, because if you ever do, I'm out of here. I'll leave you drowning in your own tears. Sorry, where were we? Oh, yes. The Joker, Folie. Arthur's a no one. He's a victim. That's the truth, isn't it? And the film's most mature observation is that the power fantasy that the Joker represents, the cult of personality, is always more captivating, always more seductive, always more fetishistic than the empty vessel that projects it. Now, if that isn't social commentary, I'm a Satan worshipper. Please don't clip that, by the way. Don't clip that bit. I'm not really a Satan worshipper, I leave that to some of the other lunatic YouTubers out there. So, it's not for nothing that this movie is being released now, and it's not for nothing that that comment is in there. If you were a cynic, and you don't have to be a cynic, you could be an optimist and believe it, you would have to say that that is probably a bit of a commentary on the whole Magda phenomenon in the United States. If you're a Trump supporter, You're going to hate this movie. 1 month before your general election, it's telling you that the cult of personality leads nowhere, that at the heart of the cult of personality there is a frightened degenerate. And if that person isn't willing to step up and do the business, there's always some fucker waiting in the wings to get rid of them and take over. There's always a young pretender, someone who's addicted to the dream. Yes? We watched the scenes in Arkham Asylum. The One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest like scenes, and we see the twitchy inmate standing at the back who looks like a young Jack Nicholson, and we wonder, don't we? What's he doing there? Is that the young Jack Napier, maybe? Is this a nice lead-in to Tim Burton's Batman? Despite the stylistic differences, of course. And we are right to fear the twitchy Jack Nicholson lookalike, because in the end, spoilers, because you're in the spoiler section, he fucking knifes Fleck, and that's the end of him. Fleck is gone. But what he's conjured up, what he's stirred up, that social discontent, that imbecilic teenage Civil War fantasy, is very much alive. Yes? The movie's actually intelligent enough, despite all of its shortcomings, to have a serious warning about the dangers of following a lunatic into an uprising. What are you kicking against? Half the time, your own mental illness. Do not be fooled. Do not follow false prophets. Do not be captivated by the cult of personality. A lot of charismatic people in history led a nation into a cul-de-sac and an inevitable date with self-destruction. Who could I be talking about? I don't know. Read a book, find out. So, that's the deal. Poor Arthur Fleck. He has a song and a dance. Him and Lady Gaga. Bond. Through the music, man. The inner music. The thing that gives light and expression to life. But even here there's a comment on movie musicals, isn't there? Because movie musicals are the great quintessential movie fantasy. They're heightened reality. They're freedom of expression. It's a world that bends to your emotions. That's why it's so captivating. That's why we love musicals. Joker, Folie is an anti-musical. It's a film that says that society and responsibility matters. Society and responsibility matters. And no one individual can overturn those things. Ultimately, as a woman once said to me, actions have consequences. Not for her, but certainly for me. Anyway, there is a little bit of world building in Joker 2. It's not a complete full stop. They set up Harvey Dent's Two-Face story. Like I said, there's another Joker waiting in the wings. If you were really so inclined, because you're not going to get Lee Phoenix back to do this shit a third time, despite his Oscar the first time round. You could go on if you wanted to. You could have the Hangover Part 3 of this series. I don't think it's a good idea. This continues the story of the first movie and ends the story comprehensively. And for me, that's fine. Never for a moment did I think that the Joker and Harlequin were going to walk out of the courtroom and go and have a lovely life together and build a criminal empire together. That's your fantasy, isn't it? It's the movie you wanted to see. But this is a movie that's trying to put a pseudo-realistic sheen on this shit. And for me, there was no scene more realistic than the one in which Harlequin said, "You gave up the fantasy, man. That's what I was in for. You blew it." She didn't want a man. She wanted a comic book character. And when the man in this movie asserts himself, when his conscience kicks in, when he realises that he's not a clown, just a deeply disturbed individual, the love interest dissipates to nothing. Holy shit, if that isn't the most real thing I've ever seen on screen in a long time, I don't know what is. In summary, the Joker, Folie, is the singing in the rain gag in A Clockwork Orange, dragged out to 2 hours and 18 minutes.
So dark up above, sun's in my heart, and I'm ready for love.
Now, if you think that's a good joke, the bit in Clockwork Orange where Malcolm McDowell and his droogs ransack a guy's house and, do unspeakable things to the wife while playing this charming, uplifting ditty, and you want to see that for 2 hours, go for it. If not, well, just watch this review instead, and the job is done.
And I'm ready for love.
The Joker, Folie, is rated 15 for an awful one-dimensional performance by Steve Coogan, Brendan Gleeson slumming it, and, a lot of shtick.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
Thank you for watching this videogram presentation.